Hello, this is Brian McHenry at McHenry Software. I'm going to do a quick overview of the structural nodes, or also known as hardpoints, how to use them, and a couple of options, variations, so you can understand them a little better. What we're seeing right now is a single vehicle rollover demo, which we'll probably post up soon or have part of the installation. The main inputs for the structural nodes are the stiffness and then the friction multiplier. These are set when you first set up your run. You go through in a specification dialog, like you're seeing in front of you here, comes up. On that specification dialog, over here is the friction structure multiplier. And then over here is the node structural stiffness. So we have a friction multiplier and stiffness. Generally, the more nodes you have, the lower this structural stiffness. The friction multiplier is a multiplier because you can have friction zones, polygon friction zones, and so you want this multiplier to differentiate the coefficient of friction of the nodes as opposed to the tires. When you select or click upon vehicle, the box shows, and on the right is the menu related to inputs for the vehicle that you can change. The one item looking like a duck is for the structural nodes. When you click on that, it brings up a sub-menu where it tells you what increment is between the nodes. And if we go back here, we turn on the nodes, we notice that right now they're half a foot in between each one. Now if we change that to 1, we click then again on this duck here, you see that it changes it. Now one other item that when you do change the number, currently if we go back to the specifications, down here is the friction multiplier and then the friction node stiffness. We're going to add that to the dialog that we just showed you, but for now, if you make that there's half as many, we should probably double or triple that because there's less hard points. So let's go ahead and make that 500, and then let's go ahead and rerun this. Now even with the lesser nodes, obviously the body is not as well defined, and so the vehicle does behave quite a bit differently. So generally, probably half a foot between. We'll go ahead and put a quarter foot and see if it, when you start making it smaller, and of course compensating for the stiffness factor. But let's go ahead and make this a quarter. We have to then click on this to say overwrite and create. Now see it's showing 4,000 hard points. And again on this dialog we're going to have the structural stiffness, but for now another way that you can do it is you go into the spec question here, and instead of 500, since it was 175, let's put it at 100. Now when we rerun it, and now if we watch how the variation on that is with more points but slightly lower stiffness. See that that's very similar to the run. Let's go ahead and even turn this off now. Turn off the, so we just see the vehicle, take the box off. See, it's going to be very similar to the half foot. And that's basically you should probably do when you're using structural nodes is set it to a half and maybe try a little less or a little more and see if the results change dramatically. When you're getting into the final refinements, I think that's very important. This is obviously very similar to the one at half, and that's something to consider. Again, the more points you have, you should have lower stiffness. The less points, higher stiffness. More points you have, the better definition of the actual vehicle periphery. The less points, it's more just for detection of interaction and or so you can monitor when or if it might interact with components of the terrain. And if you notice that when you run it with the half, it takes about 18 seconds for a 13-second run. It takes 7 seconds if you have 1 foot between them. And then if you have a quarter foot between them, it's 70 seconds. Keep that in mind, but looks like generally a half foot is what you want. You also can use what are called structural nodes based on vehicle type, and that you basically tell what kind of vehicle it is. Here we have a passenger car. So now we go ahead and run that. And it's quite a little bit different. You'll see the nodes when we click on that. Not that many nodes, and so this probably should only be used for preliminary, just testing whether or not there would be interaction. A couple other things up here on the edit. You specify the coefficient of friction for your nodes or hardpoints on card 81. And one thing you can do from this and or from the grid, and we'll go show you in the grid in a minute, but if you click on this field here and then you hit F1, it brings up the help file just like in the other, in the actual original grid. And then we can go down here and see that in 81 field 7 and 8 is setting the friction. Now if you set the multiplier to 0, then it turns off the hardpoints. If you have a case where you're not rolling over, there's no point to have hardpoints, so you might just set that to 0 and then you're not using it. Or if only one vehicle rolls over, you can set just that one to a value other than 0. If we go back out to the grid, we see that there's also down here the same setting, that vehicle structure. You set that to greater than 0. Again, if you hit F1, it brings up the help file, and we can go down and read about that file. That's basically all that's required to use the nodes to interact with the terrain. Thank you for watching.